we talked about it a few weeks ago. The locker room, it's not an easy thing, because you want to respect and you want to recognize and honor a guy that got you there and accomplish things that haven't been accomplished for 17 or 18 years. But at the same time, you've got to also respect everybody else, even in the locker room, to say, we want to give you individually the best chance of winning. So the guy that's going to be in charge needs to be the best player. So it's not easy. And Cade McNamara is not the type player that you really put packages together for like you do a la JJ McCarthy. So that's kind of difficult too, because sometimes you've got this dynamic where you've got the runner and you've got the thrower, and maybe the runner's the backup, which is kind of a good thing in this situation because you can build a little mini offense for him, packages, bring him in and do that. But Cade McNamara is not that guy that you would like be bringing into a game to show the defense something different. And so that's kind of difficult, because then he becomes the backup quarterback who's only going to see the field because it's garbage time, it's mop-up duty. Otherwise, you're just giving him series just to give him series, not because he's doing anything to the defense or presenting anything different. So that's difficult too.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to say, but I almost wonder, like, is Michigan in a bad spot with this? Like, is talented, when you look at each quarterback just in a vacuum, regardless of Michigan's situation, like you almost wonder that. Like, wouldn't you rather have a clear-cut guy who is, that guy? And I think JJ's, injury over the spring kind of maybe took away that opportunity for that to happen, but I mean, would you kind of think that this is not an ideal situation, because there's almost no winning in this situation, right? Like because I think there's some people who would say, well, Cade's not going to play poor enough to actually get the hook to just pull him, and now JJ's the number one. So you're always going to have to share time. And within that, well, then Cade's only going to have a certain amount of plays that he can make. I think he's talented, but there's only a certain amount that he can make, whereas JJ can make more of those plays, but he's going to have limited time. So it's almost as if Jim Harbaugh doesn't make that change, it really makes it a very difficult situation. There's almost no winning in it. I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't know how you navigate that to where it's actually a good situation. It sounds weird because you're talking about two good quarterbacks, but I mean, I kind of feel that way.
Yeah. You can imagine the conversation, or maybe you can't, because I don't know that anybody can get into Harbaugh's head or try to duplicate what that conversation is going to be. But for anybody else sitting down with Cade McNamara, you're about to break it to him that you're making a quarterback change. And let's say this is not after a 4 interception game in which you can say, okay, we're going in a different direction. This is either week 1, or this is after he's played a couple weeks, but you've thought, okay, we're getting JJ into 20-25% of the offense, but I ultimately have added up everything you've discussed, and we need to get to that destination. We think he's the guy. But you're having this conversation with Cade McNamara. Okay, he's got more tenure, he's got more time, he's won the Big Ten championship, he's accomplished all this stuff from last year, he hasn't done anything wrong, he's a model leader, quarterback, all those things, and you're basically telling him somebody else is giving us a better opportunity to win long term. Well, you just had this conversation with him, and then what happens if JJ McCarthy gets hurt 2 weeks later, and you just told Cade McNamara that somebody else is better equipped to lead the team to a championship? Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy.
Now that would be an absolute nightmare scenario. Well, because my thing is, let's kind of walk this scenario out. Let's say it's against Maryland, the first conference game, and Cade gets the hook. Well, with the transfer rules, if I'm not mistaken, I think if you've played what 6 or less games, you can you can transfer, and
Yeah.
that wouldn't count against your eligibility, I believe. Well, okay, let's say he enters the transfer portal that Sunday, and then JJ gets nicked up against Iowa. You know what I mean? Like that. It's
Sure.
just it's of course it's hypothetical, and there's a lot of things that could happen, but I mean, I don't think that's an unrealistic thing, because maybe not that specific situation, but injuries happen. I mean, every at some point everybody's going to be nicked up to some extent. So it's a really tough situation. And like I said, this is why these guys make the big bucks, is because you've got to make the decision, and if you get it wrong, then there's no book to get it right. But if you get it wrong, people in the media are gonna slander you, and why'd you do that? The Monday morning quarterback. So there's really no ideal situation.
And I can't think of another place in college football right this second that's got this dilemma. There are quarterback battles out there, but it's more so like both guys are inexperienced. Somebody else left, they moved on, two inexperienced quarterbacks, or where there's not this hierarchy of the guy that's won the job and the starting quarterback has all these accomplishments and we won all this with him, but he's not as good as and talented as the backup that is everybody's pushing to play. I can't think of a scenario quite like this around college football right now.
If I had to go out on a limb, and I'm not all that well versed on Florida State's quarterback situation, but
Yeah.
I know they had Mackenzie Milton, who kind of was making his way back last year, and I thought he had some stretches where he played well, but I don't know who he's battling with that quarterback battle. But yeah, I even to that extent,
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's similar to Michigan's situation.
Yeah. So Mackenzie Milton, obviously at UCF, was a great quarterback, had some big seasons, 40 touchdown type seasons, had that horrific injury. Then he goes to Florida State. So he won the starting quarterback job early, played pretty well against Notre Dame. They came close to winning that game, but Jordan Travis was the guy that was kind of a part-time starter the year before and played better than Mackenzie Milton, and ultimately won the job. And would have to play Milton at times because Jordan Travis got hurt at Florida State. But it was pretty clear, you know, well into the season that Jordan Travis was at this point a better player, can just do more things. Mackenzie Milton had obviously not recovered from his injuries, even though he did have a couple. He played well against Notre Dame and almost brought them back to a win, but he kind of faltered throughout the season, and he's moved on. So Florida State's they're clear cut at quarterback with Jordan Travis. So
Okay.
Stetson Bennett's there's some correlation between this and Georgia and Stetson Bennett, where just from a talent standpoint, if you're just believing recruiting analysis, rankings, scouting reports, he's the worst quarterback in the Georgia room, but he's just won a national championship. So that kind of separates it from Cade. For as much as McNamara accomplished, you win a national championship. That's really tough to unseat that guy. And I don't think any of the quarterbacks, Carson Beck, Brock Vandegrift, any of those guys have shown what JJ. I'm not saying they're not as good because their recruiting rankings show that they're in that category, but JJ's actually been on the field and shown us in games. Why don't
It's
we play this guy?
it is special. It is special, because I'm hesitant at times when the high caliber guys come in, 4-star, 5 stars, because I'm just more so of, once I see it on the field against other college football players, that's when I'll kind of make the judgment and get excited. But when I saw JJ, and especially more so even though it was a loss in the Georgia game, to where Michigan was down and garbage time essentially, but they just let him just throw the ball quite a bit. I mean, the ball looked very different, and it looked
Yeah.
special coming out of his hands. I mean, there aren't many guys that I've seen throw the ball like that. It just looked very, very different. And even though that game was a loss, I mean, that was exciting to see that is the future at quarterback for Michigan.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Uh, I was doing something online. This was a couple months ago, and I think I mentioned this to you and said this on the show. The same thing that I saw that on YouTube. Boom, Georgia Michigan highlights, or maybe it was a JJ McCarthy specifically, and I just thought, yeah, I'm going to check this out because this game's a blur at this point. It was months ago, and yeah, he threw about 4 passes that were just lasers that just split defenders, and he just reared back, and then he also took off a couple times where for the entire night, like it looked like everybody from Michigan's running in quicksand, like running on the beach, and versus the Georgia players. And suddenly, a couple times with JJ was kind of reversed. Well, like he turned a corner and a couple of Georgia guys didn't catch him, and and I was like, wow, yeah,
It looks different, and also too, just keep in mind those were essentially NFL players that he was running against. I mean, a lot of those guys went in first and second round, so I mean we're talking high caliber
yeah.
defenders, and it looked a lot different. It looked a lot different. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how things go.